Mexico has long been plagued by corruption, with cartels wielding significant power, often under the influence of an international cabal. These cartels not only bribe Mexican police, but also collaborate with high-level officials in the U.S. It's all about following the money. Bringing drugs into the U.S. without the involvement of certain agencies is impossible. You don't need to be a genius to grasp this. Many agencies use the revenue from illegal drug operations to fund their covert activities instead of seeking funds through official congressional channels. Just as prohibition was a lucrative business for major families in the U.S. and Canada, similar activities continue into the 21st century. This is a global trade, far beyond a mere local issue between Mexico and the U.S. The connections extend to Asia and the Middle East, with drugs flowing through countries like Lebanon and Syria. As long as there's profit to be made, stopping this trade will remain an elusive goal. Unveiling the shadow empire, the nexus of corruption, cartels, and covert operations. In the heart of Mexico, a nation beleaguered by corruption and violence, the true puppeteers of power often remain hidden in the shadows. Cartels, the seemingly omnipotent drug lords, do not operate in isolation. Instead, they are entwined with a sophisticated international cabal, manipulating the threads of global drug trade and corruption. This cabal, a collection of powerful families and clandestine organizations, orchestrates a complex dance of bribery, collusion, and subterfuge that extends beyond borders and implicates high-level officials in the United States. Historical context: the roots of corruption. Mexico's struggle with corruption is not a recent phenomenon. The roots can be traced back to the colonial era, when wealth and power were concentrated in the hands of a few elites. This legacy of inequality and exploitation laid the groundwork for the modern-day cartels. In the early 20th century, the Mexican Revolution further destabilized the country, creating an environment where illicit activities could thrive. By the mid-20th century, the drug trade had become a significant force, with cartels amassing power through violence, intimidation, and bribery. The cartel-cabal connection. The cartels, while formidable, are part of a larger, more sinister network. An international cabal, comprising influential families and covert organizations, exerts control over these criminal enterprises. This cabal operates on a global scale, using its vast resources to manipulate governments, law enforcement, and financial institutions. The cartels are merely the enforcers, the visible tip of an iceberg of corruption and greed. Bribery is rampant, with Mexican police and officials often found on the payroll of these drug lords. However, the corruption does not stop at the border. Evidence suggests that high-level officials in the United States also turn a blind eye, or worse, actively collaborate with these criminal entities. The question arises, why would U.S. officials engage in such nefarious activities? Following the money. To understand the true extent of this conspiracy, one must follow the money. Drug trafficking is a lucrative business, generating billions of dollars annually. This vast wealth is not only used to sustain the cartels, but also to fund covert operations carried out by various agencies. Instead of seeking funds through official congressional channels, which would require transparency and accountability, these agencies tap into the illicit drug money to finance their black operations. This method of funding is reminiscent of the Prohibition era, when the illegal alcohol trade enriched powerful families in the U.S. and Canada. The parallels are striking. Just as Prohibition created a black market that was controlled by organized crime, the modern drug trade is a global enterprise, managed by a sophisticated network of criminals and corrupt officials. A global trade. The drug trade is not confined to Mexico and the United States. It is a global operation with connections spanning continents. Drugs flow from Asia, through the notorious Golden Triangle, and from the Middle East, via countries like Lebanon and Syria. These regions are critical nodes in the international drug trafficking network, supplying vast quantities of narcotics that eventually make their way to the streets of the U.S. The involvement of international players further complicates efforts to combat the drug trade. It is not merely a local issue but a global crisis, fueled by insatiable demand and staggering profits. As long as there is money to be made, the trade will continue, and the corruption it engenders will persist. The Machiavellian game. Understanding the machinations behind this illicit trade requires a Machiavellian perspective. The powerful families and organizations that form the international cabal are adept at manipulating both legal and illegal systems to their advantage. They use bribery, coercion, and violence as tools to maintain control and maximize profits. They are the puppet masters, pulling the strings from behind the scenes, ensuring that the flow of drugs and money never ceases. This intricate game of power and profit is played out on a global stage, with devastating consequences for individuals and societies. The victims are many: the addicted, the families torn apart by violence, and the communities ravaged by crime and corruption. Yet, for the cabal and their cartel enforcers, these are acceptable losses in the pursuit of wealth and power. The elusive solution. Given the entrenched nature of this corruption and the immense profits involved, stopping the drug trade seems an insurmountable task. Efforts to combat it are often undermined by those within the very systems designed to protect society. Until there is a concerted global effort to dismantle the cabal and address the root causes of corruption, the drug trade will remain an enduring blight. In conclusion, the nexus of corruption, cartels, and covert operations reveals a dark and complex web of power and greed. It is a global issue that transcends borders and implicates both local and international actors. To truly understand and address this crisis, one must be willing to confront the uncomfortable truths about the systems of power that enable it. Only then can meaningful change be envisioned and pursued.